I would like to begin by thanking the many people who sent letters and emails in support of last week's homily. How difficult it was to preach, they say, but something that everyone need to hear and keep it up, so on and so forth, stuff like that, and it's very appreciative, of course. I had also some people on the other side that were attacking me for not being Second Amendment person, which is not true, of course, but the Second Amendment, I always remind people, is there to protect the First. The right to free speech, assembly, and a redress of grievances against the government. So that's not there really, I don't think, to say that we should all own a bazooka and a tank and an arsenal. That's not the point. Yes, it's to help us to keep a free society, definitely. But this isn't an insurrection. What is happening is protest. And some of it's violent, and that's not to be accepted. But it is protected, not the violence part, but protest is protected under the Constitution. And we know that. If many people don't understand, they say, but, burning stuff, and I say, yeah, I understand, it's horrible. But if it was my kid, if I had a kid, or one of my nephews and nieces, if one of them had been killed in such a way, I think myself, I'd probably want to burn the world down. So I can understand it in a little sense, but not entirely. But on to this feast of Corpus Christi, the body and blood of Christ, we are also the church, right? We are the body of Christ, we say, but not in the same way that Christ is talking about today in this beautiful, beautiful gospel. He's reminding us that he is the true bread sent from heaven, and that we have to, of course, partake in that. And a few weeks ago in the homily, the people were thrilled. He had fed 5,000 people from just a few loaves and a couple of fish. They're ready to make him king in that gospel. And he scurries off and says, no, that's not what I'm here for, and sends the disciples out back home, and he goes off by himself, and then he meets them later on, the disciples, when he walks on water in a storm. He appears to them. But he's not here to be a king, he says. No, that's not what my idea is. That's not the mission of the Father. Now, today, he is telling them, when he meets them again, the crowds, he's telling them about what he was trying to teach them when he fed the multitudes. That he is the bread of life. He is the bread come down from heaven, as we heard in the first reading, as happened for the Jewish people as they walked through the desert for 40 years. Manna came down every day from heaven, and they gathered it up in the beginning of the day so that they would have it to eat during the day. And God provided quail for them and all kinds of things. But Jesus says, no, they died. They died. Your ancestors who ate the manna from the desert died. If you eat this flesh and drink this blood, you shall never die. You shall never die. That's good news for all of us. I'd like to tell you a story. Many years ago, there was a powerful king, and he sent his son to study under a great master, a sage renowned for his wisdom and his enlightenment. And because the young man, the boy who was a prince, would one day likely succeed his father, of course, as king, the master was to teach the prince the basics of being a good ruler. And when the prince arrived first at the master's home, the master sent the prince out into the wild forest to stay there for a year on his own. And after a year, the boy was returned to the place where the master lived, and he was to describe the sound of the forest. The prince thought this was very strange, but he went out on his assignment, and when he returned, the master did indeed ask him all that he'd heard, describe it. And so the prince said, Master, I could hear the cuckoos sing, the leaves rustle, the hummingbirds hum, the crickets chirp, the grass blow, the bees buzz, and the wind whisper and holler. How many of us have spent that much time to hear any of those things? But of course, when the prince had finished, the master told him, okay, go back to the forest, though, and listen to what more you can hear. The prince was naturally puzzled again, but did as his master requested. He went out to hear what he perhaps hadn't heard yet. So for days and nights on end, the young prince sat alone in that forest listening. But he heard no sounds other than those that he had already heard. And then one morning, the young prince sat silently beneath the trees. he started to discern faint sounds, unlike anything he had ever heard before. The more acutely and closely he listened, the clearer the sounds became, and a feeling of enlightenment enveloped the young prince. "These must be the sounds the master wished me to discern," the prince said to himself. And of course, the prince then returned to the master, and he asked him what more he had heard. "Master, when I listened more closely, I could hear the unheard, the sound of a flower opening, the sound of the sun rising and warming the earth, the sound of the grass drinking the morning dew." And the master nodded approvingly. "To hear the unheard," explained the master, "is a necessary discipline to be a good ruler. For only when a ruler has learned to listen closely to the people's hearts, hearing feelings uncommunicated, pains unexpressed, and complaints not spoken of, only then can he hope to inspire confidence in his people, to understand when something is wrong, to meet the true needs of his citizens. The demise of states, the master says, comes when leaders listen only to superficial words, to sycophants, and do not penetrate deeply into the souls of the people to hear their true opinions, feelings, and their heart's desires." In today's gospel, Jesus tells us about his body and blood, and how if we partake in it, we will have life forever. He has taught his disciples, and he's teaching us that to lead, of course, means that we don't rule it over others. We don't lord it over others. Especially in the service to people, we are to lead humbly. Humbly. It was amazing. Yesterday, we have, of course, I think you know, Father Duncan. He's staying in part of our rectory. He's the chaplain at St. Catherine's Hospital. Yesterday was his 7th anniversary to ordination. And he's from Ghana, I believe. And he says, back home, Father Peter asked, we had dinner together for his anniversary, and Father Peter asked, what is different at home about how you are ordained or how you're chosen, so on and so forth. And it was interesting. He said the rituals pretty much, the ordination ceremony is the same as what we would generally have here. But when you go back home to your parish for that first Mass, which is always something that a new priest always is looking forward to, they did something very interesting. The community, he says, sets you up in a chair, like the priest chair, kind of like a throne, and they give you a spear and a shield. In other words, telling that priest that now that you are ordained, we look upon you as a community leader to defend us, yes, but also not only to defend us from wild wolves or animals and things like that, or spiritually as well, but also to defend us, he said, as families. When you see something going wrong between a husband and wife, now that you are a leader spiritually of the community, we give you the right to come and to kind of speak to us and to reconcile problems in families. Can you imagine if I came to your house and said how you should reconcile with your husband or wife? You'd throw me out and probably stone me. But that's a beautiful thing that he was talking to us about, that respect for the priesthood and that respect that we're lacking in so many ways of authority today. But Jesus tells us then not to just teach or govern or rule, but to lead a life filled with vision that the Father has given to us. That is the true cause of leadership. To lead begins and ends, as the Master was saying in this beautiful story, with listening. With listening. Begins and ends with listening. To know what is happening. As it says, not only in, outside, but in people's hearts, their feelings that are uncommunicated, that they don't even have words for. The pains that go unexpressed, the complaints, so on and so forth. To listen, not with judgment or condemnation, but with compassion and understanding. And it's a beautiful lesson that prince learns from the wise master. We also wish to learn that same lesson regarding our responsibility to those, of course, who have placed their trust in our own leadership, and those that we entrust with leadership in our nation, in our cities, in our towns. May we seek that same understanding that the Master is talking about, that we may always listen closely to the people's hearts. Jesus does that. He listens. He knows the secrets of the hearts of all people. That's why I generally say, at the Last Judgment, I will be shaking in my boots, because God can read the secrets of all hearts. And some of my secrets are not very good at all. I will throw myself on the floor of judgment at that time and ask for mercy, as I hope all of us will do, and pray that God understands my heart, that he understands my feelings. We need that also, and we need to be able to do that and to entrust with authority over us that we will work together to realize what God has in mind for us in this time and place. Let us remember that we celebrate the body and blood of Christ in a particular way today, his actual presence in the form of bread and wine, but also that we remember that we are his body as well, the church, in a different way, albeit, but that we are to be the bread of life for the world.